everyone to this evening's panel series, the first part of Mining Wisconsin Riverways, Past and Present, Histories and Activism. I'm delighted to be with the group of people that we've assembled for panel number 1. And this is a 4-part series that will extend through the summer until August 4th. It is being hosted by the Wolf River Action Committee, and it is co-sponsored by Wisconsin Conservation Voices, Wisconsin Native Vote, the Humanities Program and Center at UW-Madison, as well as the Midwest Environmental Advocates of Madison. I'd like to make a special mention of the Menominee Community Rebuilders and Guy Ryder, as well as a special acknowledgement for Justin Huckleberry, who has coordinated the panel series as well as the web manager for Wolf River Action Committee. Our committee chair early on, Guy Ryder, had asked us to think about ways that we could tell the story about the Wolf River, to extend our voices in a way that helps us gain insight and encouragement, and to bring others into the position of being allies for the Wolf River. I know that there are many stories that we could tell about this body of water. It is one of the most vital, most beautiful, and most empowering body of water in our region, if not throughout the state. When I envisioned this panel series, I wanted to include those stories and those voices from across the state and across the region of Lake Superior. And that would include not only our elders and our faith keepers and our culture carriers, but also our tribal legislators, our allies, our friends and neighbors, and other grassroots and grasstops leaders and organizations. I think that all of us have at some point been inspired. If you've ever been on the Menominee Reservation and stood on the riverbanks of the Wolf River, you'll understand what I mean, that there is a voice that has inspired each and every one of us. So miigwech for joining us on this journey of understanding more about the history of the river, of its people, and our allies who have a story to tell as well. They love the river as much as we do. I'd like to turn it over to, at this time, a citizen of the Sakagan Mole Lake Band of the Great Ojibwe Nation, Ms. Tina VanZile. Tina?
Thank you, Dee. So I'm the environmental director for the Sakagan Chippewa community, and I'm going to be the moderator this evening. And it is with great pleasure for me to introduce our elder, Dave Grignon. He's a tribal member of the Menominee Nation and is currently the director of the Menominee Historic Preservation Department and is also the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. As a TIPO, this has enabled the Menominee tribe to take over the responsibilities of the Wisconsin State Historic Preservation Officer had on the Menominee Reservation in regard to the protection of cultural resources. He has been in his position for many years, and he goes to bat to protect and preserve anything to do with Menominee culture, artifacts, and historic sites, as well as lending a hand to some of us other tribal folks who can learn so much from him. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave.
My name is David Grignon. Menominee name is Naokwa. I'm from the Menominee Wolf clan. I live here on the Menominee Reservation. I've been a tribal, first I was a Tribal Historic Preservation Director, starting back in 1992. And then in 1999, we received status of Tribal Historic Preservation Office. And I've been with the tribe now 28 years. Within that time, I've been in the opposition of Grignon mine, first of all, that was in that fight. Then the Back 40 mine on the Menominee River. And now the new mine, the Badger mine. And within those 28 years, I met a lot of good people that oppose these mines. Some of them I passed in the spirit world. And but for the Menominee people, it seems like the fight just continues. There's always a threat to the waterways of our people, mainly the Menominee River, of which the Menominee people were created thousands of years ago at the mouth of the Menominee River. And it was here that the Great Bear came out of the water, and the Creator saw him, turned him into human form. As the bear was walking up the river, he saw an eagle flying above. He said, "Brother Eagle, come down and walk with me, be my brother." The eagle descended, walked with the bear. He too was transformed into human form. As the two walked up the river, they encountered a moose, wolf, and crane. And those would be the 5 major clans of our people. Our name, Menominee, is the Algonquin word. And the word itself is Menominee People of the wild rice. That's who we are. And it was said at the time of creation, the Creator gave us 2 special gifts, the wild rice and maple trees. Said that we would always have those, of which we do today. The Menominee people lived in a vast area, over 10 million acres. And within this territory, the Menominee people would only take what we needed from the environment. And not only on the Menominee River, but we speak of the Wolf River also. The Wolf River being in our ancestral territory. And throughout history, our people would live in this 10 million acres of land until the Europeans came. And it was after that that we knew what they had wanted was our land. And the Menominee entered into 7 treaties with the American government, federal government. And within these treaties, we were forced to cede most of our land. But it was the Treaty of 1848. They wanted to move the Menominee people to Minnesota. But under the leadership of Chief Oshkosh and other chiefs, the Menominees would not move to this land. Over in Minnesota, our chiefs would go over there and look at the land. And under Oshkosh, they came back and said we wouldn't move. Oshkosh said there's land on the Wolf River that our people know that nobody wants. It's called the wilderness. He said, let me move my people there. And he had to went to Washington with a delegation of chiefs to talk to the President Fillmore and ask the president if we could stay in Wisconsin. And in 1854, we were granted the Menominee Indian Reservation. And the Wolf River bisects the reservation. One of the main reasons we wanted this present reservation was because of the migration of sturgeon. Every year, every April in the spring, sturgeon would migrate to Sheena Falls. That it was spawned, traditional spawning grounds. And I think with these two rivers, we, the Menominee people, need to try to preserve our ancestors that are buried on both riverbanks, on the Menominee River and Wolf River. And they're being threatened by mines on the Menominee River, the Back 40 mine. And now on the Wolf River, previously was the Grignon mine, but now it's the Badger mine. So within history, the Menominee people, under wise leadership, are going through this process again and again to try to preserve our cultural resources and places where our people lived on the Menominee River and on the Wolf River. When I first started with the tribe, that was the Grignon mine was trying to get approvals. And we got involved with historic preservation, and what we did is we did a traditional cultural properties investigation within the boundaries of the Menominee Reservation. And we did several interviews with tribal members. Most of them are passed into the spirit world. But within those oral histories, there's a lot of cultural information, spiritual information that our people could use against these mining companies. And the purpose of the TCP was to find out how many sacred sites, burial sites, archaeological sites were within the Menominee Reservation. We are doing the same thing on the Menominee River. We're doing a nomination, Federal Register nomination of the 60 Islands area of the Menominee River. And Dr. David Overstreet, he's an archaeologist that works with the tribe, wrote the nomination. And there's over 64 sacred sites, burial sites, mounds, garden beds, just a number of sacred areas, sacred things within the 60 Islands area. That is the nomination. This nomination went to the state of Wisconsin Historical Society, which they have to review it, which they did. But being the Menominee River, Wisconsin on one side, Michigan on the other, the Michigan State SHPO has to review it also. And this is where it's at right now. I think because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that it really slowed things down with the review process, because I don't think there's too many working over there. They're slowly getting to it. But when this nomination gets through for the 16 Islands area, it will go to the National Park Service. And hopefully the Park Service will put it on a National Register of Historic Places. And I think this will be a milestone for the Menominee people, showing that what significance the Menominee River has to the Menominee people, especially the 60 Islands area. And for the Wolf River also, we could use the TCP study we did with the Wolf River. And looking back at some of the archaeological sites, some go off the reservation north of our reservation on the Wolf River. I think there's a village up by, historic village by Post Lake that was Menominee. So in defense of cultural resources, I think we do have a lot, along with the Ojibwe tribes that live in that area, that we could use against them. One of the things is happening also with the Back 40 mine is it's state regulated, meaning there's no federal involvement. So Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act has not been triggered by any of this. There has to be a way to do that. And hopefully with the Badger mine, this can be done also. In the future, they will need permits, hopefully from the Army Corps of Engineers, EPA, all of the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. You know, there has to be some way to get this to be a federal undertaking, both Badger Mine and Menominee River, Back 40. I don't think it's impossible that it won't happen, but I just offer my tobacco every day and say I wish it does happen. But I just wanted to say the Menominees have a long history in this area. The Menominee River and Wolf River going back thousands of years, and we're still here in our ancestral territory.
Miigwech, Dave. You're always full of information that I think a lot of people need to hear, and if they haven't heard it in a while, it gets fresh in their mind and kind of empowers us again. So I always enjoy hearing your good words. With that, I'm gonna introduce our next panelist, Gary Besaw. He's also an enrolled member of the Menominee tribe. He currently serves as a Menominee tribal legislature. He is a director of both the Menominee Tribal Department of Agriculture and Food Systems and the Menominee Tribal Food Distribution Department. Gary previously worked at the College of Menominee Nation as Vice President of Student Services and on the Menominee Language Curriculum Initiative. He holds a master's in English Education Administration from UW-Madison and a bachelor's of Science in K-12 Art Education from UW-Stout. Gary is well known for his advocacy for sharing the wisdom of our Indigenous ancestors, especially as it relates to our relationships with Mother Earth. So with that, Gary, please share your good words with us.
Now, well, and Tina, well, so on the time we marking it was I thought, yeah, was Palace in the Aswisi and I thought of Manua, Wasa, got man to kick it. I welcome you all here today, all my relatives, and my real name, the one I use with my tobacco when my natnamal when I pray every day is Oskapalis. In our language, that means the old world, the old school meaning of that is a translator or a or well, it's like a translator, and or a messenger, and that's the name I was given. And I'm also of the Bear Clan. So when you heard Nakwa talk, and I say, well, Lannon for that, you heard him talk about initially our whole creation story and everything we've got. And even from our very, very creation, and we're told just as we come forward and we're birthed from the mother and as an embryo, we're surrounded by water, and we're told that our ancestral bear come from the mouth of the Menominee River and come forward. And all of our stories, all of our old stories are surrounding water, because we know that it is indeed, it's life, and that's exactly where we came from. So we're perplexed many times when we see how individuals, capitalists, want to use water or use the resources next to water for their gain in a short-term approach. The way we're taught, we don't own the water. Our job is to oversee that and live with it, and in a sense protect it, and then it'll protect us back. So that's what we try to do. In fact, when we're told there are resources in and around water, the old people tell us we never had a word for resources, because that means you're going to commodify something. You're going to take it and not treat it as a relative, as a real living being, but they are. Everything is. So we see the world different in how that goes forward. We're told many stories. The reason you heard Nakwa talk about this beautiful Menominee River here, but this whole territory that the Omatnamanewak were in what is now called Wisconsin, we've never known anywhere other than this area, because of the beautiful rivers, lakes, all of these medicines that grow here. This is where we were blessed enough to be given from our creation. We were always here. And when people talk about us and they hear us talking, we say things that we know are true, like we are the forest. We tell them we're forest people, but we are the forest. And they ask us why. But if you go back, it's only the last couple hundred years these Westerners come here and they have graves, and in theirs they have these coffins, and they have these big concrete vaults. They have these things that we never had. We allowed people, because that's not their soul in that grave. Those things are meant to go back and to feed this land, your body, your hair, your everything with you that was left of that body. We're told that's supposed to go back and feed. We've been fed by that all these years, and it's supposed to feed us again. We're supposed to feed it. So when we go out in the woods, and we've been here for thousands and thousands of years, 12,000 years, we have stories of a creation or of that goes beyond the Bering Strait theory of when they found Menominee that had killed a mammoth down by the Kenosha area. And they found that it was over 14,500 years old. That's how they dated that mammoth. And they found carving marks on it. They found where it had been it had been butchered, and they found tools next to it. It wasn't just that a saber-tooth or some other thing come up there and chewed on it, but they found the tools, the implements. Well, those were our indigenous ancestors. They were here, and that was before the land bridge theory. Our people were here, and we know that. Modern science is still trying to catch up to us. They're not here yet. But when we talk about the waters, our life has always been around the waters. All of our, for instance, even on the Menominee River up north, when we saw the graves and the burial mounds, and we saw the raised garden beds, Western scientists told us, "Oh, gee, we're sorry, Menominee. We hate to say this, but we really don't think you're sophisticated enough to have raised bed gardens up this far. You know, geez, that really takes something to do it here in this north of a latitude." Well, guess what? We proved that was us. We have those same raised bed gardens, the same types of burial mounds and the burial implements in them, and the stories, everything we have, not just along the Menominee River, we have them here along the Wolf River. All of our mounds, all of our raised beds, those are all the same at both sites. We can show this whole area that we've been in forever. So it shows that this indeed was our area, and it showed that just the area, the length that we were in, all the way up to that latitude. That's the farthest north that corn can grow. They didn't believe that, but that was Menominee. The old timers were smart. Old time ancestors, man, they had a way of doing it. And many times their raised garden beds were along the rivers. And we see that here along the Wolf also. We say they would wait and they would let the river in the spring, they would let it flood, and they'd get some of that muck to come settle in, and all the nutrients from that muck and from that dirt that would come in, and that would come into the raised beds in the furrows, and that would be part of the nutrients then that the plants could live on that we had along there. So we use the river all the time. Our old stories always talk about these rivers. We know that the spirits up high, way up in creation, and those on the earth and underground, we have stories of them. And when we have certain ceremonies, then you hear about those, and you can understand what's being said. We have tales, we have stories, but the real stories talk about the elders talking about many times our waters. They talk about how the thunderbirds come and they protect us in that fight with the underground spirits. And they'll talk, and there are places where they tell us along the Wolf River where they can see where those ancient fights happened. So there are many things, many connections that we have with them old timers. Remember, this Wolf River, all of these rivers, the Wolf River, the Menominee, all of these were our interstate highways at one time. That's how many times we got around. And it was important for a food source. It was important to travel. And right now, even Highway 55, well, that's an old military road. The US military built that along there because that followed all the old trails that Menominee had. All those trails and all the other tribes up north along the rivers, why those were Those were our trails for traveling, and those were the rivers themselves were where we lived. When we look at water to Menominee, you have to see that as living to understand it. We even had, just as an example, we had some ice blocks during a flood probably 10 years ago. And then more people come up because they said, hey, we're gonna have to get some dynamite. We're gonna have to blow all of this ice out. We're gonna have to blow it up to break that ice block. And Nakwa knows that, he remembers that. But them old timers come up and they said, well, remember, you've got to put out your Natnamaw and you've got to explain what you're doing because that river's alive. You got to tell that river, you got to ask for forgiveness for what you're going to do. And the more people remember that through the years, and that's what we did then. And everything come out fine after that. But those come from them old stories and that remind us. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to remind people. So I thank you all for what you're doing here. And I'm going to let Kristin and some others speak for a while, but thank you for what you're doing.
Good, Gary. You always have some good words as well. And one thing that really stuck out to me was you talking about how they like to use water to their benefit. And I remember in the Crandon mine, my coworker and I, we used to always bring up an issue at various meetings, how industry thinks water should be their servant. And they just never could comprehend the fact that our belief in water and the life it has. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And with that, I'm gonna introduce our next panelist. Her name is Kristin Welch. She's from the Menominee Nation. She has a bachelor's in human development and is a trained community organizer with the Indigenous nonprofit Minneconkan. And she's a lead organizer for the Women's Leadership Cohort Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. Her work includes revitalizing traditional matriarch roles with Indigenous communities through identity work, system change, and advocacy for survivors of violence. With over 10 years of experience in mental health field, she currently sits on the Governor's Council of Mental Health and is a co-chair for the Adult Quality Committee and is helping to create the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force for Wisconsin. So, Kristin, I turn it over to you.
Wawan and to everyone that spoke before me for your beautiful words. Poso Mawanawik, Natamatamo, Nataka, Mopashia, Nitotem, Kayas Mamachito, Komatno Manawak. My Menominee name means the first woman, but when it was explained to me, it wasn't like the first woman, it meant the first woman to do things, which makes sense now to me that I'm a little bit older. I'm a Martin Clan. My English name is Kristin Welch, and I'm a community organizer with Minneconnekim. And my work with the water really began, I would have to say it from the teachings from my Auntie Mary, from Auntie Orlan, and helping to understand my role as an Indigenous woman and why we care for the water and trying to build that relationship with the water first. And when Auntie always talked about that, she talked about our creation story and the way that our first grandmother looks over all of the women and all of the water for us. And we can build that relationship with the water when we talk to her, when we fast for her, when we pray with her. And we think about that every single day. And I think about it especially when we do our water walks and the place in which those water walks had originated from. There was a question from the the chief of a medicine lodge, Eddie Benton Benet, and he asked what it was that you were going to do for the water. And it was a grandmother that responded. It was Josephine Mendamen, and her response was the water walks. So she was the first water walker and the one to carry the vessel. And she walked all over. She walked so much she had to get new knees, and then she walked some more. She walked the entire Mississippi. She walked around all of the Great Lakes. She walked all over Canada, lakes in Canada. And she helped do a water walk in Menominee as well before she walked on. And we really learned a lot from her about how to restore that relationship to the water, especially as an Indigenous woman. Our uncle talked about, you know, that first home is the water for us. When we're carrying our babies, they're surrounded in that water, in that safe and that protected space. And it was the woman who was chosen as the vessel to navigate that life from the spirit world into this world. So we were also given that gift to care for the water. So it's not like a role or responsibility that is a burden, but it's a great gift to be able to say that as an Indigenous woman, we care and we'll stand up and protect for her. And we do acknowledge our rivers as being living. And when you speak to them, they become healthy. When we forget to put our Natnama out before we're entering into that space, we start to lose those connections. And I think that's what's happened with a lot of people in society, is that they commodified water because they don't understand their connection to it anymore as a living being. And they think it's something to be bought and sold. And in the same way, like our Indigenous women. So the connection between missing and murdered Indigenous women is connected to the health of our waterways, is connected to the health of our people, is connected to our creation story. And that was something that our grandmothers really wanted us to know, and to make sure that we understood, you know your creation story. It's really important to know who you are and where you come from, because in that creation story, you're going to hear all of the answers to all of your questions, but you just have to listen. And if you don't know where you come from, it's really difficult to see where it is that you're going. So if you have that, I think that we'll be able to be stronger in protecting for the water. So that's part of the work that I've been able to help with. And I don't claim to be an expert on anything. I'm still a helper, and I'm still learning under my aunties. But it's always an honor to help with the water walks and to help them prepare with the ceremonies before that, and to understand that it's a prayer for the water, and how powerful that is. You know, our thoughts are incredibly powerful. That's part of our creation story, and understanding that too, that your thoughts have power to create and power to destroy. So when we're walking with that water, the first thing we do is we speak and we sing to her and we pray for her. And we carry that as one, with one heart and one mind, that entire walk in prayer and thought and protection for all of our waters and for all of our women. And that's, to me, is the work that I continue to do and want to pass on to my daughters and my granddaughters, down the line, granddaughters, not now, but all of my nieces and my nephews. And I think about, all of our women who have suffered in some way and who may have become lost along the way. But the way to bring them home is through that water, and through them understanding their connection and role in standing up and protecting for the water. So I was able to help with a few of the water ceremonies with my aunties. One of the first ones I was able to help with was the one for the Menominee River on the Stevenson Island, when we helped prepare some special things for the river and protection for our sacred place of creation. And then again, with our relatives in Mole Lake, we were able to come together for that in prayer and protection for them as well.
Miigwech, Kristin. So it's you, all three of you have really you're almost, I'm trying real hard not to get so emotional because it can feel your guys' passion in what you do. And one question that I had of the three of you is, recently with this Badger Minerals project, I was reviewing a document from the DNR related to the rules for NR 182. And one of the things that they talk about in there is that they allow certain discharge to groundwater because they say it is unusable water. And for me, that's tough. And for any of us, that's tough to hear those words, because as you know, we all believe that all water has life, no matter whether a human is drinking it. And so from our point of view, we stated that, you know, just because us as human beings aren't using that water to drink and for crops and whatnot, does not mean that there is not other living beings out there that use it, whether it be organisms, whether it be plant life, or life itself. So, I mean, that's a question of what you guys feel about the language of it being unusable.
I would just like to say what isn't spoken of many times by Western science or by the whole commercial system is that everything's connected. And when they talk about groundwater, when they talk about anything, it could be swamps, standing water, these are all connected. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not part of that system. It's all part of that system that is that water that we need. And when we look at that, we see it is just as important, because there are what they call aquifers. There's these rivers that are underground, and water is moving, and it's connected. And it's connected. All of this water is connected. It's a big system. Even the clouds, that's water. That's water that will come down, or it's water that's evaporated up. It's a system, and you've got to take care of that. They say a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So we try to let people know we were taught to see things as a system, and that's what needs to happen. And it's not just with the water, but everything is connected in this system. Our whole world is that system, and it's not just physically, it's also through time and spiritually. It's all connected like that. And someday Western science will catch up, and someday they'll be able to understand what we mean by this. So that I want to make that point that it's all connected, and to destroy or to hurt or to damage any one of those links in that chain damages the whole system. That's what we're taught.
Let me watch for that. Dave, you got to unmute. There you go. Oh,
Good.
yep.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that. Unused water, I never heard of such a thing. All water is used by Native peoples. Doesn't matter if it's in the ground and in the air. And we treat it as something the Creator gave us. Our creation story itself centers around water. Not too long ago, one of our traditional chiefs, it was back in the 50s, there was farmers up above the reservation. There was a drought. The farmers came and asked if we'd go up there and do a ceremony, and which he did. And did his ceremony and asked, did his prayers, and asked those clouds, those thunderbirds, come down and help these people. They need water, which they did. And water can. And those types of stories are, I hate to call them stories, but they're true. That someone from the off the reservation came to us and said, we need your help to get water, to get rain. And that's what happened. And unusable water, that's just unheard of.
That's my thoughts. It was, I just can't wrap my mind around that at all. I'm gonna go to the chat room and ask a question from there.
You know, one thing I was going to say as another example, when we talk about unused water, that reminded me of a story that my son had told me. He talked with one of our oldest first language speakers, beautiful old Menominee woman, and my son's a speaker. He's taking that on. He's good at it. So he asked her. He said, "I haven't seen this anywhere in any of our books. How do you say weeds? How do you say weed? You know, there's weeds in a garden." And she said, "There's no word for that." She said, "Every plant, everything has a purpose. Maybe it isn't right here in your garden, but it all has a purpose. It has a name and an identity and a purpose. But nothing is just plain out and out useless. It all has a purpose in this world." So when we talk about water as unused or otherwise, no, it all has a purpose. That's those old stories that old people will tell us.
Mm-hmm.
That's my example.
Glitch. So one of the questions in the chat room is, what sacrifices have Native people had to make to protect the waters, the forest, the land?
Everything. I think our indigenous people have and will give everything to protect our water and land, and they have. You think about all of those ones that came before us so that we could be here today. They literally gave up their lives for us to be here in protection of the land, to save it and preserve what is left for us. And I think that our generation now is in that same fight, looking ahead for those ones that are coming 7 generations. Like, we want to protect our waters for them now. That's why we're doing it. We're doing it for our children. We're doing it to honor our creation story. We're doing it to honor our grandmothers and grandmothers that came before us. We're living the way that we're supposed to be. There is, you know, like David said, there's no other way to be. Like, there's nothing unused. There's nothing without purpose. And that includes us, you know. We have our purpose, and it's to to fulfill that, to protect that water, protect our lands, protect our people for those ones coming.
Mhm. I'm just pulling up another question here. How do we get EPA and DNR to place equal importance on cultural significance as natural impacts when they look at threats from mining? I might take a crack at that question. So I think that what tribes often do is first of all, we pursue our tribal consultation. So that's government to government talks that agencies are supposed to have with tribes so that we can sit at the same table and bring up our issues and our cultural concerns, because all too often these agencies, it's not even in their radar about a lot of our cultural and our cultural ways and concerns. And so when we have to continually educate them, because agencies, they tend to turn over every 2 to 4 years, depending on who's the president and who's in charge. And so it's a bit frustrating, because just when you think you get some agency people to understand and want to keep an open mind and address some of our concerns, they're out the door and a new person's coming in. And so yeah, I'm not sure, this is something that's been ongoing for years and years and years. And I honestly think that we have to start going above and beyond to change legislation, because there's not enough legislation that protects important areas and culturally significant, whether it's site, whether it's belief, whether it's our oral history, or any of that. I hate the fact that a project has to be triggered, like Dave was talking, a federal hook. If it's within the state, it's just the state policies and like with the Badger Minerals exploration, because they stayed under 1 acre, there was no federal hook for any kind of EIS or whatnot. And so I think it's time we have to start pursuing legislation, possibly. Let's see. Another question was, can someone explain how sulfide mining would impact wild rice?
Well, go ahead.
I just wanted to say one thing on that, is that during the Crandon mine era, we did a toxicology study, and it proved that increase in certain metals shrinks the root of wild rice. So when it's in that stage in the early spring, where it's trying to grow its roots and kind of anchor itself in, metals can shrink that. And so it's just simply not gonna grow. And it'll slowly over time it'll slowly just disappear. So, Kristin?
Ditto. That's what I was just going to talk about, that, and that there was all of that work to restore the Menominee River so that it could be reseeded again. So thinking about all of that work to restore the rivers and the Wolf River too. And if you're opening it up for mining, you're definitely opening it up for pollution. And especially with the tailing dams being so close as they are to the river, you know that that's going to seep in there and it's going to kill the rice for sure and everything else living in there.
Mm-hmm. And wild rice is very sensitive to water level fluctuation. So if they're using any nearby river to pump for any part of the mining process, if it's drawing down water that, too quickly, or especially too quickly, that could, affect the growth of wild rice too. It's a very, very sensitive plant. So it likes a nice, level, slow growing, steady environment, if that's what you want to say. I don't have any further questions in the chat. We have about 2 minutes left, so if anyone wants to add anything further, I'm just open that back up to the panelists.
If I may, then, one of the questions about the sacrifices that the tribes, the tribal nations make, and that's on a daily basis. It's never for the short term. It's always ethically for our babies. It's for the next generations, and it's for not just for the next generations of humans and humans of all colors, but it's for those other animals. It's for the deer, for the bear, for the fish, for the plants, for the water. When I first got on tribal legislature, I got cornered by my grandmas and aunties and uncles, and they come up and they said, "Now, Gary, you have that name. You're going to give that name to your children. You make sure you take care of it. And you're related to all of us. And they're going to want to know that you had good teaching. Remember, when you go and you have to vote on anything in legislature, remember, we humans, we're not top dogs. We're just part of this whole environment, this whole chain. When you're making a decision, remember that a deer can't raise its hoof and say, I object to that. I don't think we should vote for that. And that fish can't lift a fin and say, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be good for us. You have to think about that whole system and that impact. And people might say, well, tribes, you could have a lot of factories and you could have all this concrete out there and this tax incremental. You could have a lot of stuff. And yeah, we could do that, but that's not right. That's not what we're taught. And we were saved this world by the struggles of our ancestors, and they sacrificed to give this beautiful land, this beautiful water to us. And are we going to be the generation to then destroy it? No. We have to honor our ancestors and do that same thing because they did that for us. And then our babies will see that model and they'll do that also. So there's a bit of sacrifice from some of the superficial things. But I can have a car that doesn't need to talk back to me and show me all these cameras for backing up, going in reverse, and have all of these functions and gizmos on it. I don't need all of that. And if that means extracting more or destroying more or putting out more pollution, then we don't need that. We've got to sacrifice at some level. And we've got to recycle if we want to use elements. We've got to think that way. We can't get caught up in the modern day world. And that's what's happening. People want too many conveniences.
Yeah.
And more people tell us don't do that. You've got to have a trade-off. There has to be that balance. So that's what that's the situation we are in as Native people, all of us. And we understand that, and that's the ethical way to go forward. That's how we see it. So thank you very much. That's all I will say. If others have something to say, Matt, Joanne, and everybody.
I just wanted to share quickly with Tina. I taught with Rosemary Ackley Christensen, and she's from Mole Lake. And she taught me about elder epistemology, which is a big word for the wisdom of elders and how they teach us and what they teach us and how we learn and what, in that manner. And it seems like each and every one of you paid your respect and honored that tradition of consulting with elders. I mean, with or without a degree, elders have a wisdom that is from a long life and from a lot of experience. And I'm so grateful that that is the foundation that we have, because that in and of itself is a good way of learning. So I just wanted to share that with Tina and the rest of you too, that Mary came to UW Green Bay when she was well into elder status, and she still has something very unique to share with the rest of us. So I think that it's time for us to wrap up for this first panel. I know that we just didn't have enough time to share everything that we could have on the subject of our history and the relationship that we have with water from thousands and thousands of years in our existence and the existence of the waterways on this planet. I want to say Chi-miigwech to each and every one of you for bringing your thoughts and wisdom and sharing your experience and your dedication to protecting the waters of the state of Wisconsin. This is going to be an ongoing series. Our next panel discussion will be going on Tuesday, July 7th at 6:30, and at that time we'll be talking, bringing aboard some allies that are a part of our action committee, as well as community members, grassroots organizers, and folks who are also interested in being astute water protectors. So miigwech Tina for serving as our moderator, Gary, Dave, Kristin, miigwech. Again, Gigawabaman.
Gigawabaman.
Well,